Let us have a look at the top happenings around the globe this week. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of Dhaka on Saturday, calling for the dissolution of the parliament to make way for new elections and demanded the resignation of Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The mass protests in the capital was organized by the opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which accuses Hasina of failing to address rising fuel prices and the cost of living. Saturday's protest comes amid a flurry of demonstrations in Bangladesh calling on Hasina to step down and demanding new elections. Hasina has responded by calling the opposition leaders arson terrorists and warned the people against allowing the BNP, the largest opposition party, back in power. Several arrests were also made in the lead-up to Saturday's protests. Grant Wahl, one of the most well-known soccer writers in the United States, died early on Saturday while covering the World Cup match between Argentina and the Netherlands. US Soccer said that it was heartbroken to learn of Wahl's death, while his wife responded to the US Soccer statement on Twitter saying that she was in complete shock. According to the reports, Wahl fell back in his seat in the media tribune at Lusail Iconic Stadium during the extra time, and reporters adjacent to him called for assistance. Emergency service workers responded very quickly, the reporters said, and the reporters later were told that Wahl had died. Wahl, a former Sports Illustrated journalist who moved to the Substack online publishing platform, had been tweeting about the Netherlands-Argentina match earlier on Friday. His agent, Tim Scanlon, told the New York Times that Wahl had gone into acute distress in the final minutes of a quarterfinal match, which he was covering from the press tribune. German officials arrested 22 suspected members and 3 suspected supporters of a far-right terrorist organization across the country on Wednesday on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. Alleged members of the plot include a descendant of German royalty and a former far-right member of the Bundestag, Germany's lower house of parliament, according to German prosecutors and local media reports. In a statement, the German Federal Prosecutor's Office said that an estimated 50 people were suspected to have been a part of the group called Reach Citizens Movement, founded no later than November 2021, who were plotting to overthrow the government and replace it with their own order. The accused are united by a deep rejection of state institutions and the free democratic basic order of the Federal Republic of Germany, which over time has led to their decision to participate in their violent elimination and to engage in concrete preparatory actions for this purpose, the statement said. Russian President Vladimir Putin has threatened to cut oil production in response to the G7's price cap on Moscow's crude exports. On Monday, the Group of 7, European Union and Australia imposed a price limit on Russian oil of $60 per barrel in a move aimed at reducing Moscow's ability to finance its war in Ukraine, and with the hope that the move would help keep the oil flowing. Speaking to reporters on Friday, Putin said that Russia would simply not sell to the countries that imposed the price ceiling or join an EU embargo on buying the country's oil. We will possibly, if we have to, even think. I'm not saying that it's a decision about a possible cut in production, Putin said, following a summit in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. He called the price cap a stupid decision and added that it is harmful to global energy markets. He added that Moscow will announce retaliatory steps in the next few days. He did not elaborate though. The market price of a barrel of Russian Urals crude is currently around $65 per barrel, just slightly higher than the $60 cap agreed, suggesting the measure may only have a limited impact in the short term. During Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to the kingdom, Saudi Arabia and China signed a series of bilateral agreements symbolic of deepening ties between the two countries. The US watched on warily, with the agreements being yet another signal of the growing rift between traditional allies Saudi Arabia and the United States. Today, Saudi Arabia is the world's top oil exporter, while China is the world's biggest energy consumer. Currently, China is Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade worth $87.3 billion in 2021. Chinese exports to Saudi Arabia reached $30.3 billion, while China's imports from the kingdom totaled $57 billion. China is lifting its most severe COVID policies, including forcing people into quarantine camps, just a week after landmark protests against the strict controls. People with COVID can now isolate at home rather than in state facilities if they have mild or no symptoms. They also no longer need to show tests for most venues and can travel more freely inside the country. Citizens have expressed relief but also concern about the sudden changes. The sweeping changes indicate China is finally moving away from its zero COVID policy and looking to live with the virus like the rest of the world. This country is grappling with its biggest wave of infections, over 30,000 each day. Some users online have questioned the accelerated opening up. The medical system will be overwhelmed and many elderly would be infected. It begins now, one user wrote, but many others rejoiced at the loosening of a policy that had controlled their life for nearly 3 years. Until now, China had forced people with COVID and anyone who was a close contact to go to quarantine camps. Indonesian lawmakers unanimously passed a sweeping new criminal code that criminalizes sex outside marriage as part of a tranche of changes that critics say threaten human rights and freedom in the Southeast Asian country. The new code, which also applies to foreign residents and tourists, bans cohabitation before marriage, apostasy, and provides punishments for insulting the president or expressing views counter to the national ideology. All have agreed to ratify the draft changes into law, said lawmaker Bambang Waryanto, who led the parliamentary commission in charge of revising the colonial-era code. The old code belongs to Dutch heritage and is no longer relevant. Improved weather conditions allowed the rescuers to resume evacuation efforts and the search for possible victims after the highest volcano on Indonesia's most densely populated island erupted, triggered by monsoon rains. Mount Semeru in Lumajang district in East Java province spewed thick columns of ash more than 1,500 meters into the sky. Villages and nearby towns were blanketed with falling ash, blocking out the sun, but no casualties have been reported. Hundreds of rescuers were deployed in the worst-hit villages of Sumberwulu and Supiturang, where houses and mosques were buried to their rooftops by tons of volcanic debris. Heavy rains had eroded and finally collapsed the lava dome atop the 3,676-meter volcano, causing an avalanche of blistering gas and lava down its slopes towards a nearby river. Searing gas raced down the sides of the mountains, smothering entire villages and destroying a bridge that had just been rebuilt after a powerful eruption last year.
Subscribe to Oneindia channel and never miss an update.